Hello and welcome to the Auditing Antics podcast. So today we've got Michelle here, but she's not on video if you're watching us live or on demand later. She's got some fun internet issues, so she's going to join us, but just through audio. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. I am here.
It's always fun to have issues with internet. I remember when we first moved in, there were so many problems. I dealt with it for over a year. It was very frustrating. And then finally, a different technician came out to the house and they realized they installed everything backwards. So
Yeah.
that was fun to go through that pain for a year.
Yeah. Hopefully they're going to come take a look at it tomorrow, because nobody can come out right away or anything.
Yeah.
Because it's not like we don't use internet for literally everything these days. But
Yeah.
yeah, hopefully we can get it figured out, and move on from it.
Yes. All right, so today we're going to be talking about coding quality and when that becomes problematic, when it starts to slip. And Michelle, this is something that I think is really important for us to be talking about because we've had conversations in past episodes recently about the change in the industry and even the questions of what is coding going to look like for people that have not fully entered the industry yet. Maybe they've just finished their courses, their degree, certification. Maybe they do have a new job. Maybe they've been in the position for a long time. We realistically are dealing with a situation right now where a lot of entities, regardless of their size, are looking to make decisions about whether or not they're going to continue coding in the way that they have up to now, or even before, because some people have made the switch to automation already. But it's something to me that's interesting when we know that this is a threat to our industry and to
Hmm.
different positions in this career path. And we still are finding in audits that there's a lot of issues related to coding. And I don't know about you, Michelle, but a lot of times I'll get pushback saying that, well, that should be found in an auditing process. That's not something a coder would do.
Yeah,
And
no.
that's a mindset that we really need to retire at this point.
Yeah, because you don't want it to get to the auditor. The whole point is that somebody doesn't need to be looking at what you're doing. And if they are looking at it, they're finding that you're doing it correctly. So
Mhm.
that mindset is just a no-go right from the get-go. So if that's your compliance plan, let's find it on an audit. You may just want to sit down and review it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I've seen issues, for example, where the place of service is incorrect on a claim form and it's billing out constantly for telehealth and everything's
Hmm.
still showing place of service 11. And then when you ask the client what's going on, what's driving that, what's in the workflow, what's in the system, they'll say, well, that's not our responsibility. That's something that's defaulted by the EMR or by the practice management system. And at
Hmm.
the end of the day, that's still resulting in a claim that goes out that's not
Yeah.
accurate and not supported by documentation.
Yeah, just because something is pre-populated for you does not mean that you're exempt from validating that that is correct.
Hmm.
And I think that is one of the big misconceptions that have come into play with all of the technology that has started to be implemented, like with being able to upload your payer policies into your EHR and things like that, your system, so that certain things can be pre populated. But that's not so much to say it's accurate. It's only accurate if it's supported by your provider's documentation or you have a way to support that. And that's I that's a very common audit finding that I have with telehealth, to be honest, is they're putting in a place of service that the patient's at home, but then there's no documentation that indicates the patient's at home. Or
Right.
sometimes you even review the HPI and the patient's out of town, and then it becomes a whole other issue. But automation doesn't mean accurate. It just means it's pre-put in there for you. You don't have to type in 10 or zero
Mhm,
two
mhm.
or 11.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes too, when you're able to identify that through the coding process, you can have those conversations
Mhm.
earlier to Michelle's point where you're not waiting for an audit to find the problem. You already know it's an issue. You notify somebody. Maybe if you are in a coding position, you're not the one who's going to be responsible to find the root cause of that and help find the solutions, but you can be the person who identifies the trend and starts to have those conversations so that the system doesn't have all of these issues that are occurring for who knows how long until, there's an adverse finding on an external audit.
Exactly. Because then you're in an even bigger situation than you were if you had just noticed the workflow issue and
Mhm.
corrected it.
Yeah. And I think too, this really goes down to the fact that if people are in this industry, if you're in a medical coding position or you want to be in one or you want to stay in one, this is where you're going to have to start taking personal responsibility for the education that you have, the quality
Mhm.
that you have. You cannot always rely on that from an employer because there could be situations where maybe you're working for a smaller practice, you are the only coder, and you're answering to a practice administrator who doesn't see the value. Or
Mhm.
maybe it's an even smaller group. There's one physician who owns the practice, and you're on an island by yourself to figure it out.
Mhm.
Those types of situations are going to force you into a position where you need to take more control of that. But I find that people that are working in larger organizations for hospital systems, maybe even organizations that are staffing coders into positions for hospitals, things like that, there tends to be this thought process that you just follow with that sheep mentality and you just do it because you were told it, and you don't take it upon yourself to get extra education, to
Mhm.
question something if you see something wrong, to question why your leadership is not worried about it when you know that that's a real issue if you're seeing it and it will affect reimbursement if found on an audit, things like that. But there's too many people that are wanting to just stay, go with the flow, stay on the path. And Michelle, I think that that's the type of positions that we have the most threat to right now with automation.
Mhm. Absolutely, because what honestly, what is the purpose of the coder even looking at it if you're not going to make sure the guidelines are being followed, even if it's already been entered in or automated by the system? Um, that's going to be the thought process behind that. So
Mhm,
it's more important than ever that coders and compliance as a whole is being vocal about their worth and what they bring to the table and how they help protect the organization as well as bring in money, because at the end of the day money talks, and you know
mhm,
what I mean, like they don't want to hear about it otherwise. But it's definitely concerning to me because I feel like even when I started out in coding, and maybe this is a culture thing, Stephanie, um, but it it was more so this is how we do it, this is how you need to do it. Um, let's not ask any questions. And then like the person teaching you is the same person who's been doing it for how many years. You don't know when the last time they've reviewed policy changes or what their training and background even is. So it can kind of create this trickle down effect of inadequate education. And
mhm,
it might not even be because the education's not being provided, it might actually be the person providing the education. And that I feel like that can be as bad as just not getting any education at all, to be honest. I mean, you and I have both sat through different training sessions or webinars over our years where we were like, "Ooh, yikes, did that really just get said?" So
Mhm.
so we know it's out there, but I feel like it's just this, you're expected as a coder, keep your head down, and you're praised when you can get a lot out the door. You're not praised when you find something that costs money. I mean, denials cost money at
Mhm.
the end of the day. Um, so it's just, I feel like it's just become more about production.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, it's never going to be only about the revenue and reimbursement. And there is a lot of focus at times by administrative departments that that's the main goal. But ultimately, you can't even keep that revenue if you don't have compliance.
Hmm.
So, what's the
Exactly.
point? If you make it out the door, it's a quote unquote clean claim and you get paid for it. And then 2 years later, you have to pay that back. That with, extra fees and damages and whatever else depending on the situation.
Having to
So,
pay to defend yourself, like the
yeah,
list goes on.
mhm,
So,
exactly. And, there is this concept or this thought process in the industry that we look at coding and compliance separately. And I even see
mhm.
this in some of the organizations that I work with where we have a revenue team, an AR team that is on their own island. We have coders, we have auditors, we have educators, and we have compliance. And the question is always like, okay, why are they not all working together?
Yeah.
Especially when we have coders, auditors, and compliance not working together. That's even more alarming because that all has to go hand in hand. And it doesn't matter what compliance is doing if coding knows nothing about it and they're not applying it. There's, yes, compliance has more that they have to oversee than just the
Mhm.
day-to-day work that a coder's looking at, but that all has to collectively come together. And next week we're going to talk more about that too, with the different levels and why you can't take compliance out of something. Um, Really, it's important to understand that in whatever position you're in, you can't have blinders on.
Mhm.
You still have a particular um, responsibility, really, I would call it, as a compliance professional, as someone who's certified. We have our ethics that we have to work by, and none of that includes sticking your head in the sand and just doing something because you were told it, even though you may have questions or that that's not appropriate.
Mhm. I agree, but a lot of times it's really hard to stand up and say, "You're telling me to do this. I know it's not right. I'm not going to do it." Because I think a lot of people think that that is insubordination, but I think
Hmm.
it's how you approach the situation is really going to determine the outcome. I think if you approach it calmly with your facts, facts are important. Opinions are not guidelines. Facts and guidelines are, you know what I mean? Like you need to have your sources. And sometimes you're going to have those conversations and they're still going to look you in the face and say, "So,
Hmm.
nobody's ever nobody's ever come back and said anything. So why does it matter?" And then you have to start having conversations with yourself, not in a crazy way, but conversations about, what am I going to do? Am I going to be okay with this? Or, how far do you take it?
Hmm. Well, and I know that's a difficult situation that some people have to work through and decisions they have to make. But the other thing you can do too, if you're in that position, you can lay groundwork to show what misinformation you've been fed. So, for example, if there's somebody being told, oh, we can't change a place of service in Epic, every telehealth is an 11 place of service, then maybe email that question so you have it in writing so you can back yourself up, and
Mhm.
then start doing it the correct way. Because if your leadership is going to come down on you one way or another, might as well focus on your own quality, because realistically we know not everybody can just get out of a situation like that,
No.
especially if we have less organizations that are hiring coders, which still that's up in the air right now. We have a lot of entities that are quick to get rid of the coding department to
Mhm.
use AI, and then we also have others who think they will never do that at this point. So when you're in that situation, realistically, you are having to make a difficult decision, but it still doesn't mean that you can put out non compliant work just because you're being told that, when you know better, when you should know better. All of those things are going to matter at the end of the day if that comes back to the organization on an external review.
Mhm. And then who are they gonna go to? I mean, I can remember, working for a organization where, like you explained, compliance was completely separate. And they would be doing audits. We'd be none the wiser. And then they'd come back and say, well, why is this all wrong? And it's
Hmm.
like, well, it would have been nice to know when you were looking at it so we could explain if it was something. Because at the time, there were a lot of things that just went out the door without coder review. Um, which is, I mean, is there really anything that can
Yeah.
that should go out the door without coder review? Um, but it it was just one of those things that was like, well, we didn't know it was a problem, and that's not held for review, so we couldn't look at it. And so it doesn't work to keep those separate, like you
Yeah.
said.
Yeah. Well, and from the coding perspective too, I think some people just get into the day-to-day workflow, and it is very monotonous depending on the position. For me, when I was coding and started out, it was nice because soon after I had started, within like 6 months to a year, I was able to start working with different specialties. So
Mhm.
it really changed up my day-to-day work in that way. But that may be something where, if you're listening to this episode and you know that you just, go in and push stuff out because that's the expectation, maybe pause and think about what it is that you're doing. If there is a situation, for example, Michelle, we have both seen situations where entire progress notes, 100% of the progress note, except for a signature, is copied and brought forward from a previous visit. My question is always, how did this get through coding, especially in Epic when we can hover over the selection and we
Mhm.
see that that was constantly brought forward visit to visit. That type of thing is not something small. That's something where somebody is intentionally ignoring a problem and
Mhm.
submitting that charge out. And, I would think that if someone's qualified and trained to be a coder, that's something that should be very obvious that you should at least be questioning.
Yeah. Exactly. And just want to say here that if you are an auditor and the client you are auditing for has Epic and they are not giving you Hover to Discover, that is a nice big red flag.
Hmm.
Because why not?
Yes.
If
Yeah.
you have no problem, why not?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
sometimes people have responded, well, we don't want that evaluated. And it's like, well, it's a problem and you don't want to do anything about it. And I have ways to look at that without Hover to Discover. So, surprise,
Well, that's
you
exactly
cannot
it.
hide.
Yeah, because when a payer is requesting maybe a hospital stay, for example, we see this
Yes.
all the time in the hospital or with psychotherapy or things like that. They're most likely going to ask for multiple notes. So whether you're in a system and able to use a smart tool to identify the compliance issue, or if you're reading notes and you can tell that every time that note is reading exactly the same, that's going to be problematic. And on a coder's level, if we break it down, no, the coder may not be seeing the June visit side by side with the July visit. But if you're in Epic, and I've conducted many audits like this, where from an auditor's perspective, I can't even say any CPT code is supported because everything, and I mean 100% of the data other than that signature, is copied and brought forward. That's something that could have been seen by that coder internally, even if you're not doing comparisons as an auditor. So there's certain things like this on this level that still should be a coder's responsibility, even if you're not the
Mhm.
one who's going to take that to the next step.
Yeah. And I just want to take a minute, Stephanie, to remind our listeners that CPCs are professionals and we do have education surrounding these things. We may not be clinically trained, but that's okay. Coding is not intended to be a clinical interpretation. But just as a reminder, as a CPC, you have a formal, nationally recognized certification that you had to take an exam to verify your competency in coding. It requires specialized training to accurately translate the documentation into those codes. We are supposed to be committed to continuing education by submitting our CEUs through AAPC. We have ethics and compliance responsibilities. And so I, our role does have an impact on the overall operations of healthcare, but I feel like that is forgotten and put to the wayside, and coders are looked at as the lowman on the totem pole. But
Mhm.
really, we are have specialized training to do what we do. And for some reason, it has just become acceptable to not look at that professional training that we have and move on from it. I
Yeah, and
I'm a
respect
firm
it.
yeah, not respected usually. I mean, look at
Mhm.
some of the conversations or meetings you have with physicians where you get absolutely waylaid and it's considered acceptable, which that's a completely different topic for a completely different day. But I'm a firm believer anybody can learn to code, but you have to do that before you can before you can be a CPC. Um,
Mhm.
and it's about the training and what we do with the tools and knowledge that we have, and that is often recognized.
Yeah.
So it's something to be proud of, and part of being proud of that is being proud of the work that we're putting out and having, pride in what we do. And it doesn't mean that we're never going to make a mistake. I mean, here I am 10 years into being certified and still making mistakes. It happens. We're human. We have oversights. Maybe we read something wrong. I can remember in my early on days of coding, a coworker and I were looking at guidelines of something and it literally came down to punctuation, and she was interpreting that punctuation differently than I was interpreting that punctuation, and it was like it's just one of those things, you know what I mean? So yes, we aren't perfect, but we should strive to put out the best that we can.
Yeah. And remember too that with the changes that are coming in the industry or that are here already, I know I say this so much, but this is a real issue for a lot of people that I meet each week in this industry. But with these changes coming, the thought process and the roles are changing as well. So it's no longer going to be enough to just look at and select a CPT code.
Mhm.
You're going to have to go above and beyond because we have to be looking deeper into these areas to identify things like the risk of the organization, larger compliance issues, things like that. it's more going to become that type of role as opposed to just sitting there and validating and selecting a CPT code, because as you've seen, a lot of that is already being automated and replaced in different organizations. So that question
Yeah.
now is, do you have the ability to take this a step further and apply all of the different things without relying on leadership alone? You know, being autonomous. You have to make these decisions. You have to want this for yourself. And that's going to become more and more important the further we go with the implementation of all of this technology.
Hmm. And I do just want to add in there, you had said something about just assigning a code, getting a code assigned, but we can't forget all that goes into assigning a code, because there's code specific guidelines that come into play and things. So that is what we are trained to interpret, and that is what's being forgotten. And I think
Mhm.
that's why organizations are so easy to just say, we could replace this with something more cost effective and it will be a lot faster. But at the end of the day, we've seen some of that, and it's not so pretty right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in the future we're going to have a lot more stories. We're in the middle of it right now where we're seeing the bad decisions being made and I've said cheap labor before, trying to save a buck in a budget, and it really is causing issues. But on our side as coders, auditors, professionals, you have to remember that you can't be a part of the reason that someone's deciding to make that decision. We have
Hmm.
to maintain our quality, compliance. Yes, you have to balance all of that with productivity, but that's a part of what this job is in the industry.
I agree. And finding it is possible, in my opinion, to find that happy medium of being allowed to take the time to research something that needs research, or go in and correct something that needs to be corrected, even if it was put in front of you in a certain way. It is possible to still maintain a productivity standard that is reasonable and do that. We're
Mhm.
not sitting here by any means saying, oh, you need to sit here and you need to take 15 minutes on one urgent care office visit. That's not what we're saying at all. Um, you need to be able to manage that expectation, and it is possible. Maybe you aren't going to be getting out 500 encounters out the door a day, but the 400 that you manage to get out will be quality, less denials, less compliance issues.
Mhm.
I just made up those numbers, by the way. I don't think I produced that much in a day. Uh,
Well, there's some organizations that have really high, crazy production requirements. So
well,
I don't know.
yeah.
We'll have to do a deep dive in an episode, I think, on management and what that looks like, because some
Yeah,
of that
because
also plays into the issues.
if you're praising somebody for the number of encounters they got out the door, um, did you bother to look at the quality of what was sent out? Because that probably is going to cast a large shadow over that number.
Hmm.
Um, I can remember sitting there listening to, oh, so and so did this number on end of month. That's great. We all need to try to strive to get more done. And I know the person who does quality, and I'm like, we should not be praising this at all. I mean, when people talk. Um,
Yeah.
but you know, don't don't praise that kind of behavior, especially if you haven't validated the quality. And if you're somebody who's on a team who's not being praised for that, maybe your quality is better. I don't
Hmm.
know, maybe not, because we've
Yeah.
seen that too. But quality is always going to be better than quantity.
Hmm. Yep. We got to have balance. It can't be. It really can't be one or the other. One without the other is just might as well be cheap labor. So we have to
Yep.
be careful about how that's happening. Now, really quick before we end, Michelle, I had mentioned last week that I had a big announcement coming out this week. And yesterday on Tuesday, it all came out where I am officially partnering with Audigy. And I'm really excited about this. Audigy is a large ENT organization and also, audiology, obviously. Um, but they had come to me months ago. We started to have some conversations about potentially partnering. And as I was talking with them about their goal and their mission for their organization and their members, it was really clear that we have a very similar mindset with what we're trying to accomplish in the industry. We just do it in different areas. So one of the areas that they really needed some extra support with was compliance as it pertains to coding and billing. So I'm happy to announce that we do have this official partnership where members of Audigy's organization are eligible to join up for my membership through that organization. And we have a lot of ENT specific information that's going to be available. The Q&A is available as well, the Ask the Expert with the 24 business hour response. I always have to say that even though it's like an ad, because I do think that's important when people are in the middle of their workday trying to figure something out. Um,
Yeah. It's not just like a chat feature where Stephanie will answer you any time of the day. She has to
yeah,
answer me. She has to answer me any time of the day. No, she doesn't, and she does not. Um,
no,
that would be unrealistic. But
yeah,
still, there are some people who are like, "Oh, it's been a day and I haven't heard anything."
yeah.
Um, it's
But
such
with this, it is fast. It is
it is
fast because it's
such a
important to not
great
have it sit for a week.
it is such a great feature though. I think that
Mhm.
is something that really should be highlighted because you can ask literally anything. Like, you know everything. I don't care what you say. You know everything. If there was Jeopardy for compliance, you would win. Um,
I know a lot of things, we'll say that.
no, you know everything. No, don't discount yourself. Um, but yeah, that's a really awesome feature.
Mhm. Yeah, and with the partnership as well, we'll be doing things like educational webinars throughout the year. Members will have live Q&A sessions with me. We'll talk about what's going on in the industry, open it up for questions. That's one of the things where, you may not realize something's an issue and then you hear someone else talking about it and all of a sudden you're like, "Oh no, I need to go check that." So I always like the live discussions
Hmm.
where we can go through those things, and I just am excited for the partnership. I've met some of their members already that have joined, and they seem like great practices. And it's one of those things where if we look at healthcare in the U.S. and as that pertains to compliance and coding, there's a lot of times where smaller organizations just don't have support. They don't know how to access it. They don't think that they have a budget for it. And that's one of the things I really like about this partnership. They do have organizations of all sizes, but I do view that as being able to go out and support more of the small practices in the
Hmm.
community, the mid-sized practices, and people that may not always seek it out in the busyness of the day. So I think this is going to be a strong partnership. I know they're very excited as well. And we've got a lot of information going out there. But if you are in the ENT space, definitely check it out. You can go on to my website, it's on my homepage. I also have a separate page on there specific to the Audigy partnership where you can see what that looks like. You can go to the Audigy website and take a look at everything that they do. This is just going to be a small portion of what they offer, but I think that this is something that people really need more than ever in the industry right now.
Hmm. I agree.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. We will be back next week to talk more about compliance and dive into specifics related to why we can't just be blind as we're going about our day-to-day work. We've got to pay attention to the big picture and make sure we know what is going on to the extent that we are able to. So I
Hmm.
hope this brought some additional thoughts across everybody's mind. Think about it between this week and next week. Reach out, leave comments if you have questions or something to say about that. And we will see you back next week.